This weather video is driven by 802cars.com, representing 802 Toyota, Twin Cities Subaru, and 802 Honda. They're all located off of Exit 7 on Interstate 89. Looking at the broad picture here through the country, and you can see a digging trough of lower pressure with these clouds that are heading northwest. This is spinning up a surface low, and this surface low is going to be pulling a cold front and tracking a lot of moisture into Vermont eventually. Utility impacts for this VELCO weather hazards outlook. Generally low this period with gradient wind gusts anticipated for Tuesday with a shot of much needed rainfall. Another nearly identical system will be working in for late this coming weekend, generally on Sunday into Monday. Slightly unsettled weather for Wednesday and Thursday with good project weather today, the rest of today, Monday, and then returning Friday and Saturday. The tropics, the tail end of the season here, but a possible disturbance yet to develop. This across the southern or western part of the Caribbean basin that could track north late this weekend. Some of that moisture could become entrained and work up the eastern seaboard. That's a long ways off. We're looking at generally decent project weather again the rest of today. This ridge of higher pressure is the main influence here, and of course this upper level system. You can see the trough of lower pressure with a lot of digging energy and somewhat of a cutoff low here. It's spreading in a lot of moisture. It's being pulled on this side. Of course, the flow on the south side heading south or north to south, and we're seeing drier air work in. This is what's going to be eventually working into Vermont for Wednesday and Thursday. A little bit more unsettled and just barely cold enough to produce a few wet snowflakes in the northern Green Mountains. This would be anticipated somewhere along about Thursday night. Looking at the 6-hourly panels of the European model, you can see that area of low pressure tracking into the Great Lakes. This is late tonight, about 2 o'clock in the morning, and then tomorrow morning, and then you can see some moisture working up, and a relatively narrow band, as usually is the case. This will also be producing some gradient wind gusts and kind of a dry slot in between. Showers eventually get out later in the afternoon on Wednesday. You can see still lingering a little bit into Wednesday night. And then Thursday, some lake effect, and 5,400 meter thickness in this blue dashed line means it's basically cold enough aloft. Some of our local mountains may get dusted up in the very highest peaks. That moves on out pretty quick by the time we get into Thursday night and Friday. And then you're looking at high pressure ridging in for a couple fairly nice days Friday into Saturday before the return of another system. And take a look at the bottom of that screen there. You can see some precipitation working up the coast into the Carolinas and then right up into Vermont. This is a long ways out. This is a very complex scenario here, something we'll have to keep a close eye on, as colder air will be just to the west across the Great Lakes. GFS ensemble centered on Burlington, Vermont. You can see the main affair here with precipitation working in and then kind of unsettled. A little hint here at the next go-around. And then behind that, a little bit of some blue plumes, meaning a little bit of snow, but wouldn't count on a lot here at this point. Where's all the precipitation? Well, the next 7 days, the total quantitative precipitation forecast has it streaming north. A couple different branches here, north and south. Again, this is going to cover both of those systems, soakers. And the best rains, again, right across our neck of the woods, running about anywhere from 1.5 to 2 inches, 2.5 inches potentially by the time we get toward next Monday morning. So, well-advertised cool down after a pretty nice warm day we're looking at today. And then even tomorrow, we're going to be above 65 degrees for most areas. And then that sharply cooler weather works in Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday night. And we can see incrementally some cooler weather. This is the freezing mark here. And looking at 850 millibars, roughly about the top of Mount Mansfield, you can see temperatures getting really close to 32 degrees. The possibility of a little touch of snow, but nothing serious here. Very little in the way of precip. You can see temperatures try to make a little bit of a rebound upward. The European actually has us back in the upper 50s to low 60s in this general area here. A little different look now in the MOS guidance, meteorological output statistics. And it's warm in the west, or warming up in the west. Coolest down here where that northerly flow is I showed you earlier on. And of course we're still relatively warm. This is for the next 5 days, high temperatures only. What about 3 days later? Not a lot of change. We're still going above normal here. And neutral, if not colder than normal, across a good section of the country, well down in the Gulf Coast. That's fairly significant to see these temperatures drop in Florida like this. And a brief look at the tropics in the southwestern Caribbean basin. We have a 40% chance of cyclone formation over the next 5 days. This system looks like it could develop and then maybe either move or get stripped of its moisture and then pulled along the coast for that next soaking rain potential along about Sunday. Another point of interest, and we'll get to gradient winds here in a second, and this is thunderstorm activity. This is calibrated severe thunderstorm chances. And you can see it gets into the Hudson Valley, and this is valid at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. So some instability definitely across eastern portions of New York, trying to get into southern Vermont. This is about as close as it comes at 5 o'clock in the evening. And then you can see that it's mainly Massachusetts, Berkshires, Litchfield County, Connecticut, and so forth, as things wind down into the night. But we do have some potential for some lightning strikes and some thunderstorm activity mixed in here. Okay, looking at the gradient winds here, this is the NAM model, and you can see some oranges. This develops this evening. This is actually 8 o'clock this evening. So the next 3 hours, that would be 11 o'clock, and you can see some slightly elevated winds. Nothing too serious, but a little bit of channeling wind is going to start to develop overnight tonight. And then we get into about 34 to 38 knots, and that's putting us right in the vicinity there with the red, where potentially we could see some tree limb damage. We start to get in that 38 to 42 knot range, and even a little bit higher than that, 42 to 46. So there could be some wind gusts in the 40s, especially channeling in the Champlain Valley with a typical south wind, as it usually does. And then that begins to decrease. That's about 5 o'clock in the evening on Tuesday. And it kind of lifts on out, and that's it. And last but not least, this is a Typhoon Lan that's headed for Japan, looking right down the barrel of the eye. Roger Hill, Wuthering Heights.